Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us on the line today. Welcome to the first event of this worker welfare webinar series, which we're hosting as part of the launch of our new worker welfare resources. Before I hand over to our moderator, who will be telling us more about these worker welfare resources and introduce our speakers, I just need to cover a few housekeeping points. But first of all, we saw a few new names in the registration list for today, which we're really excited about. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Chloé Prend-Leloup, and I'm the manager in the social performance and sustainability team at Ipieca. Again, just for newcomers, we'll start with a brief introduction to Ipieca in case you haven't come across us before. So Ipieca's vision builds on its core goal of advancing the oil and gas industry's environmental and social performance to support the sector's contribution to the energy transition and sustainable development. Ipieca was formed in 1974 following the launch of the UN Environment Programme and was established as the key interface between the oil and gas industry and the United Nations with an initial focus on environmental and climate issues. However, in the 51 years since then, we've expanded, and today we work across four main pillars, which are, as you can see on the slide, sustainability, climate, nature, and people. This provides a unique platform for the industry to work on these interconnected issues in a holistic way. To achieve our vision, we bring together our member representatives with key external stakeholders from across UN, NGO, civil society, and academic organizations. This is to share knowledge and develop good practice to really advance climate action, environmental responsibility, social performance, and also mainstream sustainability. And today we're really pleased to introduce this new resource from our people and sustainability pillars. Right, briefly on the next slides, you can see our members. Ipieca is very much member-led, and we have nearly 80 members that you can see on this slide. Right, and one more item for me to cover before handing over to Cynthia. I'm sure everyone will be familiar with these guidelines, but just as a reminder, please mute yourself unless you want to ask a question or make a comment, which we encourage. There are two ways for you to raise questions. Throughout the webinar, you can write your questions on the Q&A box, or during the Q&A session, you can simply use the raise my hand question function, and you will have an opportunity to ask a question live to our speakers, which would be a really interesting exchange. We encourage you to put your camera on, especially if you'd like to ask a question. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be shared to those who registered after the webinar. And finally, the use of AI-powered recording transcription type of tools are prohibited at Ipieca. Please deactivate them if you're using them currently. And if we find some, we'll have to remove them. Right, so this is it for me. Once again, welcome everyone. I'm leaving you in the safe hands of Cynthia Peterson, who's custodian for social performance at Petronas. Cynthia is one of the leading members of the worker welfare work stream, which has been instrumental in developing these resources, and a co-chair of our human rights working group. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Chloe, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining our webinar today. I'm really excited about sharing this work with you because I think it's a topic which is really salient among many member companies. So just a little bit of background to our webinar. So member companies in Ipieca from our supply chain working group and the group that I'm in, the human rights working group, we've compiled key existing guidance on topics that were selected as priority themes by members. So the two priority themes are proactive worker engagement and responsible recruitment. So with this, there's a plethora of really helpful and insightful tools and resources over the years that have been produced by various stakeholders. So our objective is, of course, not to reinvent the wheel. So our objective here is to provide an easy-to-use signposting document that'll help practitioners identify key resources that you need, at different stages of your business lifecycle, so that we can implement proactive worker engagement and responsible recruitment. And so in the resources that we'll be sharing very soon, they provide definitions, a summary of what key tools there are, and you can find all sorts of interesting information on the two topics that I've mentioned just now. So you can access all of this helpful resources by scanning the QR code if you go to our website. And also, sorry, you can access them at our website, and you can also scan the QR code that we will be sharing with you very soon in the chat. So the work that we've done in this webinar series, is really to be sharing sharing insights, meant for our suppliers, clients, and partners, to promote basically a convergence of industry definitions as well as good practices. So we're really delighted that you're joining us today so that we can share this work with you. And we hope that if you find these resources helpful, please share them with your colleagues. So this is the webinar series kickoff. So we're really launching our resources today. So the topic that we're going to be talking about today with two of our speakers is worker welfare. So there will be another webinar in May, on the 6th of May, which will be looking at proactive worker engagement. So our final webinar, also in May, will be on responsible recruitment. So we'll be sharing the links on how you could register for those. Before I hand it over to our speakers, a little bit on definitions. In our worker welfare summaries, we've looked at worker welfare as being about respecting and promoting the rights and welfare of our employees and contractors. These are in line with the 10 Building Responsibly worker welfare principles. You'll be hearing a lot more about that very soon. And these are all in line with the ILO, as well as promoting care for people. So as you can see on screen, we have two speakers for today's webinar. So Manuela Corredor Vasquez is the Manager Human Rights at BSR. So she manages the work at Building Responsibly. And it's a group of leading engineering and construction companies working together to raise the bar in promoting rights and welfare of workers across the industry. So she'll be sharing a lot more about Building Responsibly, what it does, and the principles that they've developed. Our second speaker for today is Anu Anmo, who's the Human Rights Program Manager at Technip FMC, one of the members of Building Responsibly and a company board member. So she was, as a little bit of an insight, she was part of the Ipieca worker welfare team at the start of this project. So I'm really pleased that she's able to see the fruits of her labor in today's webinar. And it's really helpful to also hear from her about the integration and implementation of the Building Responsibly worker welfare principles into Technip FMC's processes and activities. So before I hand it over to the speakers, basically each speaker will be presenting one after the other. So if you have any burning questions that can't wait, please either type it in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, keep the questions till the end of each speaker's presentation, and then let's see if we need to move on to a Q&A and discussion after that if we have time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Manuela.
Thank you, Cynthia. Give me a moment while I move here. Okay. So thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Chloe, and to Ipieca for the invitation. It is nice to be here with you all today. My name is Manuela Corredor Vasquez, and I am a manager of human rights at BSR, who is the secretariat for Building Responsibly, the initiative that I am here to talk about today. To begin with, about introduction on building responsibly and who we are. So as Cynthia was mentioning, we are a group of leading engineering, construction, and energy companies working together to raise the bar in promoting welfare of workers across the industry. Currently, we have about 22 members, including board members and associate members, working in over 100 countries and representing over 1 million employees. Our mission is to protect and enhance the welfare, dignity, and respect in the built environment and energy sector through collective and consolidated business action. And as Cynthia was mentioning, for us, it's also very important to work through the convergence of the industry. We do so by creating and adopting common principles, which I'm going to be talking next, and tools implementing those principles. We have designed a set of different tools. We also engage with relevant stakeholders, including workers, clients, governments, civil society, and international organizations on capacity building, understanding more the challenges across the industry to promote worker welfare, and addressing those challenges. And we do so by driving innovation and continuous improvement. A bit about the history of building responsibly. So the initiative began in 2014 with the boom in global construction, and they raised interest, increasing interest from different stakeholders, including shareholders, civil society, governments, etc., to have more responsibilities and see more responsibilities on worker welfare across the industry. That led to a series of multi-stakeholder engagement roundtables, and in 2017, Humanity United funded a project and a research project from BSR that explained how the industry was ready for collective engagement. That led to the official launch of Building Responsibly with 6 founding companies. And in 2018, we got one of our biggest milestones, which was the launch of the worker welfare principles. After the launch of the worker welfare principles, the Building Responsibly have worked in developing and implementing different set of tools and initiatives that are targeted to address challenges that are prevalent in the industry. And why companies join. And this is very relevant because building responsibly enables a pre-competitive environment and collaboration that it's made for companies operating in the built environment and energy sector. It works to maximize the impacts on the rights of welfare workers in the operations and subcontracting chains. It's a great opportunity for companies to share challenges, expectations, opportunities with peers, to learn from other stakeholders, including civil society, clients, investors, and other stakeholders, stay abreast of current and emerging trends, requirements, and best practices. And we are always working on those trends and best practices, improve workplace management practices, and very importantly, Building Responsibly wants to shape and influence industry regulations and frameworks. And that is why we are here today, because we have a strong, solid partnership with Ipieca. We have worked together in informing different resources at Ipieca. Ipieca has worked with us as well to inform some of the challenges that the members of Ipieca are seeing in the industry. And it's a very collaborative initiative. The principles, the worker welfare principles, informed the resources that are being launched today. So that's an ultimate goal of Building Responsibly, is to continue improvement on worker welfare across the industry in a consistent manner. I want to say hi to different Building Responsibly members that I see that are today in this call. You are welcome to share any insights, any considerations during my presentation or after a news presentation as well. I'm happy to see you here today. A bit about the tools that we have in place. As I mentioned, the biggest milestone was the launch of the 10 worker welfare principles in 2018. But after that, we have developed guidance notes, case studies. We have a self-assessment tool that is available to all companies in the sector, and a supplier pre-qualification questionnaire. All of these tools are available in our website and are publicly accessible to everyone. So if you are interested to learning more, feel free to visit our website or contact me if you have any questions. And now I want to jump into the worker welfare principles. So the principles were developed to serve as a global recommended practice on worker welfare for companies in the built environment and the energy sector. The purpose of these principles is to unify worker welfare in the industry and enable more visibility of worker conditions in very complex value chain, which traditionally expose workers to a lot of vulnerabilities and where companies have lack of visibility in many opportunities. By being developed these principles by companies in the industry, these principles already reflect the challenges that most companies face when dealing with worker welfare and by working on multi-tier supply chains. The principles, as you're going to see, are independent yet interconnected and are complemented by guidance notes to each of the principles, which provide an overview of the different challenges that might be faced when implementing the principles and some key components and elements that companies should consider for effective implementation of the principles. An overarching recommendation for companies is to have policies and processes embedding these principles in the practice and making them available across the supply chain. Later, we're going to have Anu, who is a member of Building Responsibly, presenting on how they are effectively implementing the principles. The principles also encompass the very important idea that these companies in the industry have a crucial role to exercise leverage in promoting workers' welfare. So let me talk now a bit about each of the principles. We have 10 principles, as you can see here. The first one refers to workers are treated with dignity, respect, and fairness, and this refers that workers should not be discriminated against any characteristic. There is a heightened risk of abuse where companies in many global constructions or in the built environment or energy sector rely on migrant workers, low-skilled workers, and workers with low level of literacy. In these circumstances, companies should increase and pay particular attention to their projects and operations to ensure that all workers are treated with dignity, and the first principle encompasses that. The second one refers to prohibition of forced labor and child labor, and these principles resonates with the understanding of the industry that the locations and diverse supply chain in which the industry operates subject workers across the supply chain to significant vulnerabilities. Construction and energy is still largely dependent on manual labor, and this includes a lot of low-skilled labor. This kind of labor may be subcontracted, and labor agencies might be used to get like more aggressive program schedules, which subject and predisposes the sector to high risks of exploitation, hence the second principle. Then we have principle number 3, which refers to fair recruitment. And of course, as we all know, workers shall be recruited through ethical and legal means, whereby all their recruitments shall be free from any discrimination or unethical treatment. However, in some regions and countries, it's still very common to secure jobs in construction, in energy, through recruitment agencies or intermediaries who identify the workers, recruit the workers on behalf of the companies. In those circumstances, companies may have little visibility on the working conditions, and workers might be subject to some vulnerabilities on forced labor and child labor. Also, by working in different legal and cultural environments that could lead to navigate certain uncertainties, this principle explains a bit on how to navigate those challenges, legal uncertainties, and implement practices on fair recruitment. Then we have principle number 4. On freedom to change employment is respected. This relates well with principle number 3, whereas all workers should be free to move from jobs. In practice, when workers are hired by subcontracting agencies or employment agencies and are working in different locations, there might be restrictions to mobility, so this principle resonates with that freedom of changing of employment, which should be respected. Principle number 5 refers to working conditions that should be safe and healthy. And this is particularly relevant for the industries we work with because they are intrinsically hazardous and, I would say, physically demanding nature of the work exposes workers to a lot of vulnerabilities. Hence, it's important that companies have robust practices on adequate conditions and safe conditions for working. We have principle number 6, which is still connected to principle number 5, which refers to the living conditions, which should be safe, clean, and habitable. And this refers to many workers who are provided accommodations in the locations, in the working locations, working sites. So the living conditions should be adequate and dignified. We have principle number 7, on access to documentation and mobility that should be unrestricted. And this also refers a lot with migrant workers, in which cases in many countries where large infrastructure and construction activities taking place, workers' mobility and access to personal documentation might be restricted by law or by practice. So this principle focuses in addressing that balance for companies between meeting legal expectation and complying with workers' welfare and dignity. Then we have principle 8 on wage and benefits agreements are respected. And of course, a pillar on labor relations are wages. There are many countries still that lack regulation on minimum wage, which could lead to inadequate wages or not meeting a living wage expectation. Hence, importance for companies to have processes and policies in place to respect the living wages and adequate wages. Then we have principle number 2 on worker representation, which should be respected. Also, there are countries who limit or prohibit freedom of association. So this principle refers to a balance that companies should have in respecting workers' representation. And finally, we have principle number 10 on grievance mechanisms and access to remedy. This refers a lot on how all employees and workers should have access to effective grievance mechanisms that enable remedy. This principle number 10 is very relevant for building responsibly this year because every year we have 2 work streams on relevant and important topics. And one of the topics that we are developing this year, it's on grievance mechanisms and access to remedy. So at the end of the year and early next year, you will hopefully see some of the results of the process of this year-long work on remedy in building responsibly. We're also partnering with Ipieca on the remedy, and we will have some presentations in the Ipieca week if you're interested in learning more about remedy and grievance mechanisms. And finally, I just wanted to show a bit of the architecture of building responsibly tools and how the principles are embedded into everything that we do. The guidance note that complement the principles as well as the different tools that we have in place are targeted in meeting every principle. Applying the building responsible principles in practice will be unique to every company and varies from by company to company. So we are here with Anu from Technip FMC, who I'm gladly that she accepted the invitation to present on how in practice they apply the principles and the different building responsibly tools. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat or raise your hand, or feel free to reach out to me. Here is my email, or we can stay in touch through Chloe.
Thank you so much, Manuela. That was really insightful, on giving us an overview of the principles and the tools that are available to help companies navigate through often complex situations, with several layers of different levels of workers according to where they're working. Yeah, please do add your questions to the chat, or if you have a burning question, please raise your hand. And if you're happy to, you can ask Manuela your question right now. I'm just going to give people a couple of seconds to think about their question.
If not, maybe when they see in practice how the principles are implemented, they will have more questions.
Definitely. Yeah, before we get to that, just maybe perhaps a little bit of a teaser, you mentioned just now that remedy seems to be the focus for building responsibly this year. Can you shed a little bit of light on why this particular aspect was deemed to be the focus, and what can we expect, from some of the work that's being done on grievance mechanisms and remedy?
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, this topic was selected, as I said, building responsibly members select topics based on different challenges they are facing, needs for additional information, capacity building, or consolidated practices. So what we are doing in the Remedy Working Group and what we expect to have at the end of the year is consolidated guidance on what fair recruitment is, what an effective remedy should be, how do companies should develop grievance mechanisms and that lead to effective remedy. So overall, it would be some consolidated guidance for the sector. And we have some members, if they want to also mention a bit of why they were interested about the remedy piece.
Yeah, that would be great. If anyone has a question, feel free to ask your question right now. Yes, there's a hand raised. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Iram Hashmat from OMFAO. I just wanted to understand that all these principles we already know, but when we go for the compliance check and for the principle like workers are treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. So we can, while doing the on-site check, we can do the interviews with the workers to check this kind of options. But if you don't have the option to visit the site and you are doing an organizational compliance check, and we wanted to check these kind of principles which are like more qualitative than asking from the employer that how to verify such kind of principles while doing the compliance check for pre-qualification.
I see, Cynthia, there are some hands raised. Do we want to collect other questions?
Sure. I mean, if you're happy to, Brian, I think you have your hand raised.
Yes. Thank you, Cynthia and Manuela. My question revolves around freedom of movement of labor. So in the past, I've seen some projects where if an employee is, let's say, working for one contractor and they would like to move, they've gotten a better opportunity with another contractor, they'll be told to, for example, either sit out, give about a 3 months notice before they can take on employment with the other contractor. So wouldn't this be looked at as maybe some kind of inhibiting the freedom of movement of labor, free movement of labor? Or because it's a notice period and it's usually, let's say, project rule, then that can be, I don't know, whether overlooked or something, for lack of a better word. Thank you.
Thank you. I see another hand, but I can't see names.
Hi, do you want to ask your question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Pranay Rai. I am from International Manpower Recruitment in Nepal. And we are also a certified ethical agency from OTL recently. My question is regarding, my question is directed to the building responsibly principles. How have you all been initiating to implement or interpret the policies in the countries of the destination, especially in the Gulf and the countries like that, where a lot of migrants work? And then if the policies and the procedures, the practice of ethical recruitment is being trickled down, because what we found is on a lot of occasions, there are very good standards, set of principles and policies adopted at a headquarter level, but this kind of policies are not interpreted to the HR, the people in the destination countries. So what are the initiatives that we all have been taking it so that the migrants that they get recruited from countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India are getting ethical standards? And this is my actual question.
Thank you, Pranay. So I have three questions. The first one is how to monitor the implementation of the principles, which I think resonates with Pranay's question on how to monitor that all policies and everything from headquarters are implemented at the site level. Anu is going to talk about some of the instruments that we have in place that address the principles in practice and how that translates into suppliers and into managers that might have more visibility along the site level. Overall, it's ideal that these policies, of course, come from the top level, top down, because that way the policies and principles are embedded in the company. And for managing implementation, it's also recommended that all processes and policies are easily accessible to everyone, suppliers across the value chain. And that means that are accessible in terms of language, resources, that it's information that's understandable to them. That's another way of making sure that the policies and processes are effectively implemented. And to the question on, and I'm going to, like, Anu will be saying more about that, but on the question of freedom of movement, the notice period is something that's a standard in most employment. So generally, it shouldn't be considered as a limit to the freedom of movement. What's important for respecting the freedom of movement is that everything is clear and said in the contract. So if the contract have a notice period, that should be respected. However, if the practices of the notice are not implemented and not a like consolidated practice of the company, then it could be considered an impact to the freedom of movement because it could be considered a reprisal or something else. So if the notice period is within the contract terms and policies, HR policies of the company, that's completely fine as far as it is reasonable and it respects the workers' welfare. Anu, maybe you want to say more on how you monitor the implementation of the principles.
Thanks, Manuela. So, Manuela, I would be talking about how Technip FMC is, pragmatically using certain tools which Building Responsibly has developed. So, probably, if we are done, maybe I will just, try to try to give answer to Hasmit's and Pranay question, during the flow of my presentation, if that's okay.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Manuela, for your presentation, and also thank you for those interesting questions. Yes, without further ado, Anu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cynthia. So, hi everyone. I'm Anu Anmol from Technip FMC. For those who don't know Technip FMC, we as a company are a leading technology provider to the traditional and new energy industries, delivering fully integrated projects, products, and services. I work at Technip FMC in the capacity of their Global Human Rights Manager. And today I'm really grateful to be invited by Ipieca to share a few insights on how we as a company have integrated these worker welfare principles into our processes and systems. And as Cynthia mentioned that we so there are several associate and steering members which are part of the Building Responsibly. So Technip FMC is currently a steering member committee to Building Responsibly. So without further ado, so for Technip FMC, worker welfare for us is about respecting and promoting the rights and the welfare of not only our employees, but the workers that we have in the value chain, in line with the 10 Building Responsibly worker welfare principles, which Manuela just talked very nicely about those. So in Technip FMC, so the human rights program that we have, it is basically situated at the heart of our corporate compliance strategy. We do try our best to apply a 360-degree cohesive approach to the due diligence framework so that we can not only cover our own internal operations projects, but also our supply chain. So therefore, in the next couple of slides, you would be hearing more on how we have implemented these Building Responsibly principles into tools and questionnaires that have also helped us to not only perform our own human rights due diligence, but also to carry out the suppliers' human rights due diligence that we are very proud of. So, as Manuela mentioned about the building responsibly tools architecture. So we have also, tried to integrate those tools in our management systems, and we try to basically link those in order to make sure that we are using those principles to strengthen our own management systems, our risk assessment methodologies, and how we can really, expedite the remediation processes. Because one of the key focal points of Building Responsible members is also this year would be to focus on expediting the remediation processes, that we as a company are really trying to work upon a collaborative solution to. And so basically we try to do all of these things, and we try to implement it into our core business operations to drive measurable and sustainable improvements that we can see not only in our company, but also in our supply chain. And we absolutely, swear by the 10 worker welfare principles that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. So there are a few of the policy documents which I have just mentioned, which is the Technip FMC Code of Business Conduct, Technip FMC Expectation of Suppliers, which we call as integrity expectations. So all of these policy commitments, they are very tightly linked to these 10 building responsibly principles that we are just speaking of. Then moving forward. So this is a snapshot of our supplier human rights due diligence process. I think just for this presentation, I tried to basically focus this practical implementation of tools around the supplier human rights due diligence process that we have in place, so the audiences can better understand that how we can use this principles not just as theoretical principles, but also something that we can really practically embed in our policy procedures and the overall human rights due diligence process that we have. So like, in any company, the supplied human rights due diligence, these are made up of these 4 key steps that you can see on the screen right now. So the first is supplier selection and pre-qualification questionnaire. So I would like to, come back to the Hasmit's questions when she had asked that, having principles is one aspect, but how we are really making sure that we are basically trying to check for the supplier conformance for these principles on a management system level. So what we have done, Hashmit, is that building responsibly as an industrial association, the members and the industry association has worked to develop a lot of, tools such as pre-qualification questionnaire tool, self-assessment questionnaire tool, which, members are, adapting and improvising to embed it in their due diligence process. So similarly, Technique FMC, as part of our supplier selection and pre-qualification process that we as a company follow, we have incorporated certain elements of those pre-qualification questionnaire tool, which is based on the worker welfare principles. And we had tried to basically integrate into our supplier general questionnaire, wherein, you have also, questions related to other aspects such as finances, HSE. So that element of PQQ tool, it acts as a first layer of filter to check for the human rights risks in the new supplies onboarding that we are doing at a corporate level. So so basically how we are doing that. So basically there is a set of questionnaire that we have, which is based on these 10 worker welfare principles. As like any registration questionnaire, the suppliers are asked to fill the responses to and then share the documents. So if the documents, or if there would be certain gaps in the responses that they have provided, so then we have also developed a remedial plan which is based on this building responsive principle. Let's say, for example, a supplier has said that they are paying the recruitment fees, or there is no recruitment fees checklist available. Since that question is tied to our building responsibility principle, we have a remedial plan in place that has a template of how the supplier can develop their own responsible recruitment policy in place. So we make sure that the gaps which are identified at the screening process, it gets resolved with the remedial plans which we have developed based on the elements of the PPQ tool. Then moving ahead comes, so once the supplier is registered and has gone through all the mitigation measures, once they are finally contracted and onboarded, then what we do is as part of Technique FMC, so all the suppliers which are onboarded and which are qualified to work with, we ask them to basically comply with our COBC and also a general terms and conditions, because as mentioned previously, we want to work with like-minded suppliers and customers who respect and uphold similar human rights and worker welfare principles as that of Technique FMC. So basically, this infograph is showing us, as I previously mentioned, that how we have integrated it. So as part of the onboarding process, those GTCs, the general terms and conditions, which are basically the mandatory clauses which the suppliers needs to go. So they have the obligation to not only follow these building responsibility principles in order to fully implement them on the ground, but there is also a binding terminology that they need to further flow down these 10 building responsibly worker welfare principles to their sub suppliers. I think this particular measure is required because a lot of times, as part of our experience, we have realized that when we had audited a sub supplier of a supplier, they said that there is no obligation, that the supplier that their supplier had on payment of recruitment fees or retention of the passports. So I think we as a company, we kind of thought that as a learning, we should not only be just asking our own suppliers to have the compliance with these worker welfare principles, but we should also make sure that whatever sub suppliers or subcontractors which are providing their services to our tier 1 suppliers, which will be used for the for the scope of work for Technique FMC activity, the entire supply chain should have those worker welfare principles to be flowed down. And yes, it does require a lot of patience and work with our global sourcing procurement team. But I think with due time, we have managed to work with our supply chain in order to materialize this, and we are still trying to work with the team and with the projects to at least have the mandatory flow down of these human rights clauses on building responsibility principles to be made mandatory for all our high risk suppliers that we are screening as part of our annual assessment process, which brings us to this to the third stage of the due diligence process, like how we are doing the ongoing monitoring and tracking and performance. So here once again, building responsibility principles, not just the theoretical guidance notes that you can see, but they have a self-assessment questionnaire tool which is based on these principles. So Technique FMC is using this self-assessment questionnaire tool as part of our level 1 due diligence of the supplied human rights process. So what we are doing is that so we had already had the first level of screening that we did from the at the stage of the pre-qualification. So once that supplier has been onboarded and like they are already existing supplier with us, so every year Technique FMC, we have our own annual modern slavery risk assessment methodology where we try to choose top 50 x number of suppliers based on certain key parameters which depends upon their country risk, their spend, whether they are strategic or not, whether they are single source or multiple source. And then based on that modern slavery assessment methodology, we identify our high-risk suppliers. So then these high-risk suppliers, we basically ask them to go through, or basically go through to kind of use this SAQ tool so that they can give the responses. So in Technique FMC, we have automated the SAQ tool, which we have leveraged from building responsibly, and we have basically done certain automated scoring model. So based on the scores that suppliers get on the responses of the SAQ, which is a self-assessment questionnaire on the 10 principles, we basically risk ran them. Then all the medium risk suppliers, based on the threshold score that they have attained, they go through this assessments where we ask them to further share their policy procedures, basically work, like get onto a Teams chat with them, understand where are the gaps existing in the management system. So we really work with them on a long-term basis to identify those gaps and then provide them guidance to overcome some of the non-conformities. And of course, these suppliers are also required to go through the training materials that we have developed using the guidance from Ipieca labor training and certain resources which building responsibly has also contributed to. And then for the high-risk suppliers, we'll directly be advancing them to the stage of the onset audits. Then again, for the onset audits, the internal checklist that we have prepared last year, it is again based on the 10 worker welfare principles. So in that on-site audits, so compliance checklist is one aspect to it, but then there are worker interviews and then group interviews, which are also a part of this. And apart from that, we also do carry out certain ad hoc worker interviews, because we really understand the importance of worker induced voice or a proactive worker voice to be made part of the supplied human rights due diligence process. And this is how we kind of come to the most important stage, which is the remediation and the corrective actions. So we make sure that based on the gaps or the findings that we have identified in our supply chain with a particular supplier, we try to basically, because we have already carried out in-depth worker interviews, and basically we have also captured anonymous group survey. So we do have the insight from the workers as to what are the gaps that needs to be fixed. Of course, there are corrective actions which are also being made related to developing certain policy procedures, but we try to ensure that the corrective actions which we are really working on, it is really touching on the pain points of the workers, touching the pain points of the workers which are involved, in our supply chain who is working with that supplier. And of course, all the medium risk suppliers and high risk suppliers are anyways required, to go through the training resources, which I feel that I'm sure most of you would have already gone through the Ipieca labor training resources, and I think we personally have found the training resources to be really helpful for us to have the trainings built for our own for the awareness of our own procurement professionals, awareness as well as for the supply chain to learn and understand where they can work more better in order to understand some of the criticalities of the human rights topics remediation. And then last but not the least, I will just try to basically share you these two slides. So these are basically showing that how we have integrated these principles at every stage of our due diligence process. So on the top you can see that there are 5 key pillars where we have embedded these principles either in form of checklists, policies, methodologies, questionnaires, that I've just covered in the previous slide, which really ties back to the PQQ tool, SAQ, the training guidance notes, which Building Responsibly has. Then, as you can see that in all, on all these 5 pillars of the due diligence process, how we are, integrating each of these pillars with the tools and guidances that we have from the principal. So just to give you for an example, the supplier qualification, you can see that it is all tick off because we are focusing our supplier qualification on our PPQ and the SAQ tools, which is based on the building responsible principle. So this really gives us a very clear cut understanding in terms of what are the the actual or the potential non-conformities which the supply chain is having. So it is so the practical implementation of the building responsibility it is readily being covering our supplier qualification step. Then for the risk assessment, so the annual risk the annual modern slavery assessment methodology that we have developed, we took the help of the building responsibly country risk scoring tool which they had, which we kind of used it to understand which are the high risk countries, medium risk countries. And then for the risk assessments, since they're already going through the PPQ, there are policy checks that are happening. Then again for the supply chain monitoring, so we are not so so the supply chain monitoring is usually for the medium risk suppliers where we can't really, straight away directly jump into the on-site audits, because I think we all will agree that on-site audits, it really require a lot of time and resources. So for the medium risk for the medium risk suppliers, we are doing that by making sure that they are going through the SAQ tool, the SAQ questionnaire, and then we are basically checking the IDs verification. For example, if the workers, let's say if there is a potential indicator of a child labor that has come to the notice of our supply chain manager who has visited the supplier, then we are asking the supplier to please provide the the list of the the employees or the young workers which they have in the company. So it is basically done in conjunction with the other practices that you can see are mentioned over the slide. So I think I would be happy to take further questions or queries which the team may have on this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anu, for running us through a very detailed demonstration of the practicable steps that Technip FMC has taken using the tools that are available, and going through the whole process from start to finish. I think it gives everyone a flavor of how the building responsibly principles are implemented in a very practical way at the implementation stage. I noticed that we are perhaps running a little short on time. So maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions. If you have any, please raise your hand or type them in the chat. And yes, please unmute yourself when you and if possible, switch your camera on if you want to ask your question.
Hi, Anu. This is Ely Hughes from SLB. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I just wanted to ask a question on I think it's really, really great what you were saying about touching the voices of the workers at your suppliers and things. I'm just interested to hear your insights on how your suppliers have kind of responded to these audits. Do you find them working collaboratively with you, or have you seen challenges in doing this?
Okay, so I think Ali, that's a great question. So, of course, it working with the suppliers, to get them agreed to the on-site audits, or even for them to, participate in our human rights compliance program was initially, bit of challenging, and I would be, honest to admit that. But we have been doing the supplied human rights due diligence since 2020, and over the period of time, we have realized that the suppliers, once you have I think the first thing which we can really make it right in order to have a better buy-in from our suppliers is to have the contractual clauses to include the sections wherein we are asking the supplier to collaborate and participate in the human rights audit program, and basically to work with the contractor to remediate those processes. So what we realized that like previously we were getting certain pushbacks from the suppliers, because they were telling us that you have just asked us to adhere with the COPCs and integrity expectation, and this is what we are doing, right? So whereas like where it is written in the contract, so basically then we got a wake up call, and then what we have done recently is that we have reviewed the contractual language that we have with the suppliers, and we have specifically put a clause on the human rights that is based on these 10 worker welfare principles that we have, and it is also having the clause that it is giving them certain days that they need to come back with the queries, they need to participate, and if they will not be complying to the request, then there will be a business escalation or some sort of a disciplinary measure that will be taken. So we have been able to really manage I would not say notorious, but those challenging supplies by really going a little hard on our contractual clauses. And the second part is that what we have realized that previously what we were doing is that we were of course using the help of a third party auditor to do these supplier audits. But what we have realized is that this human rights and worker welfare, it's a journey, and that it goes beyond compliance. So last year what we did is that we have developed our own internal methodology on how we will perform the human rights audits on our supply chain. So by doing that, we are making this entire process a bit more collaborative, where we are pushing this human rights compliance program not as a tick box or as a compliance exercise, but more as a co-learning as a collaborative way to learn what they are doing, what we are doing, and how we can help us together to build and strengthen our human rights management system. So I think these two approaches have really helped us to have a better buy-in from our suppliers.
Thank you very much.
Pranay, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So my question is, uh, it was great to know about the HRGT due diligence audits and the monitoring mechanisms. However, I was just curious if there was any kind of an initiative that you've taken to educate and train the suppliers within your supply chain. And if it is so, if there has been that kind of an initiative, would you be able to highlight us and let us know as to how things are turning out to be?
Sure, Pranay. So, Pranay, as part of our due diligence process, of course, remediation is one part of it, but the remediation can only happen when there is a proper, understanding, awareness, from the suppliers, right? So for the supplier trainings, what we have done is, so we have our own set of island modules that we have developed on several human rights topics. And for example, taking your case of manpower labor agencies, where we have seen that, the local manpower suppliers, probably what we see in Nepal and Philippines, they are not that mature enough to basically, adhere to our building response principle, which is on responsible recruitment, right? So what we have done is, so we are, currently, focusing on developing worker welfare principle based module training for, which can touch on each of these topics of building responsibly separately. So we are trying to make those training module to be available on YouTube, which we can share with our suppliers before and after, so that they understand the whole procedure related to one aspect of the principle. So this is how we are, kind of working to enhance the awareness, particularly in our supply chain. I just basically give you the example of the manpower subcontractors, because for us, it is one of the, the high-risk supplier category that we have. And we have an additional, enhanced human rights risk screening for them. So they need to understand that why there is a need for the enhanced assessment. And that is why what we are doing is we are building those topics, the topic / principle based separate models for the suppliers to be, allocated to. I hope this
Thank you,
answers your
Prani, for
question.
your question. And thank you, Anu, for taking all the questions. I'm afraid we're out of time already. So I'm just going to hand it back to Chloe and thank everybody for your kind attention. And please join us in our future webinars on these topics that we've been talking about today. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you. Just a very quick round of big thank yous to everyone, our participants and speakers. What insights we got today. Really grateful for all of your time. Just very briefly, you can see the QR code to access the worker welfare resources on the screen right now. And a final thing for me to say, as Cynthia mentioned, we have our next webinars in the series on 6th and 7th of May, and you can already register to the second one via the link either in the chat or on the slide. And yeah, thank you so much for staying a little bit over time, and have a great rest of your days, everyone.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Anu.
much.
Thank you, Manuela.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.